Hi, I'm Coach Amber, and welcome to the Meet RX Success Story podcast. And today we have a special guest with us, Scott. Hi, Scott.
Hi, Amber. Thanks so much for having me. I'm a huge fan of the MeetRx podcast and platform.
Yay. So, Scott, tell us, what was your health like before implementing a meat-based diet? What was going on with you? What was your life like?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks again. So I grew up with probably a standard American diet as a child. I was fed treats to be complicit and be compliant, as many of us were. You know, my parents did a great job raising me, but sometimes to quiet me down or get me to stop complaining, it was Elio's pizza and chocolate milk and waffles and Oreos. So I was a little chubby growing up, not overweight, or I don't think anyone would classify me as fat even, but I definitely had some extra pudge on me. And then around high school, eighth grade actually, I got very into rowing, competitive rowing. At first, of course, not competitive, mostly just trying to keep up and catch my breath, but eventually competitive, and was recruited to University of Pennsylvania for competitive lightweight rowing. And I rowed competitively for 8 years, which involves making weight similar to wrestling, and usually 2 to 3 hours of rowing every single day, year round, sometimes twice a day. We all know Sean Baker. It's vigorous exercise on the rowing machine. Well, it's true in the boat too. It was intense cardio, some weightlifting, and staying in shape all the time, and also having to cut down and keep my weight really low, similar to a wrestler or an MMA fighter. So, my diet evolved and it got a bit healthier. There was more of a focus on protein, but still a lot of carbs and artificial sweeteners, and 0% Chobani yogurts were a staple with the syrupy fruit. And after making weight for races, my teammates and I would go and binge, and sometimes we would gain and lose 20 pounds in a week. And of course, that's not all fat, but it was water weight after making the weigh-ins. And so I developed not a great relationship with food, I would say. And also coming out of school and stopping rowing, I wanted a way to stay in shape and not get really fat without rowing three to 6 hours a day. So I was looking for something a little bit healthier, and it was around 2014 at the time. And I think I started becoming introduced to the paleo diet and the slow carb diet through Tim Ferriss. So my diet evolved then to more focus on removing carbohydrates, especially, and sugars from my diet. And I was doing a really poor version of the paleo diet. I was eating boneless, skinless, boiled chicken breast in giant spinach salads, and a ton of olive oil and a ton of nuts, and then some eggs. And that was pretty much my diet. And then once a week or once every 2 weeks, I would go out to like a very nice dinner at a good restaurant and have dessert and have some wine, and kind of cheat a little bit with my girlfriend at the time, now wife. And so that worked okay. I think I gained like 20 pounds post rowing. I went from 150 pounds. I'm 5'10", so definitely not overweight, to 170 pounds, but definitely what you would call skinny fat. I had very little muscle mass from rowing, especially in my upper body. Rowing is mostly legs, believe it or not. And so then, my diet evolved over the years, starting work, trying to keep in shape while working 80 to 90 hours a week in these stressful jobs. I came to know Mark Sisson and the Primal Blueprint diet, as well as Sam Feltham of Smash the Fat. He's now the head of a organization very similar to the Nutrition Coalition here in the US, except in the UK. I forget exactly what it's called, but essentially they work with doctors to try to reform the nutrition guidelines in the UK. And he had a diet that was basically keto before keto was mainstream at all. It was really low on the carbohydrates, very high on the protein, sometimes intermittent fasting, which is basically what I was doing. And that worked okay for me. I kept in shape. I kept my body fat levels low. I was strong. I was healthy. I felt good. But I still had problems. I was still not sleeping very well. I still had really high stress levels. My body composition still wasn't where it should be, given I was resistance training. I still had really low muscle mass. I had trouble concentrating during the day. I was always tired, partly due to the poor sleep, partly just lower energy. And my gut health was not great. I had a lot of gut irritation and problems, and sort of just things that, you know, some of my colleagues and friends, as we were in our 20s and starting our professional careers, were like, oh, guess this is getting older. Guess this is things that happen when you're 23, 24 years old, which I don't think is right. And so, you know, slowly but surely, I happened upon the carnivore diet in 2016. Amber O'Hearn was on the Two Keto Dudes podcast back before there were any carnivore podcasts or a lot of carnivore information out there. And that's kind of how I discovered it. But I want to make sure I'm saving the right pieces for the right question. So your first question was just what was your health before carnivore, right?
Absolutely.
Got it.
Yeah. That was perfect. Yes.
Okay, great.
Okay. So when you first started going meat based, talk a
Yeah.
little bit about how you implemented the diet. Like what did you eat? Did you include dairy? Do you include dairy now? Did you have any transitional issues? Anything like that?
Yeah, absolutely. So when I started, again, it was in the fall of 2016. So coming up on 4 years ago, a little before Sean started, actually, I think. And I had been on a keto diet. I was intermittent fasting. I wasn't tracking macros. So I was pretty much eating a really high protein, lower medium fat version of keto. Pretty close to carnivore, some vegetables still in there. And Amber was on the podcast talking about how vegetables may not only not be necessary, but may be harmful in some ways through plant defense mechanisms and toxins, plant toxins. And at the same time, was really interested in this guy, Ash Simmons, who's on Twitter and Instagram. He's Carnivore's Creed. He runs the website High Stakes, really digs into a lot of great scientific information. I think he's based in Australia. And so I said, hey, what the heck, I'll give this a go. I'll drop the little amount of plants out of my diet. I was looking for a way where I could eat as much as I wanted and achieve better body composition and feel better. And I thought, I love eating meat. I love eating till I feel stuffed. And this seems like a way to do it. And at the time, there wasn't a lot of great information out there. There was a ton in the Zeroing In on Health Facebook group. I'll give them that. But I wasn't familiar with that group yet, or as familiar. And there weren't things like, you know, Sean's book, Paul Saladino's book, all these excellent resources for getting started on carnivore diet. There was no MeatRx back then. There was no World Carnivore Tribe. So I'd say the way I started the diet was not great. I made a lot of mistakes. I was eating some dairy, but I was primarily eating, I'd say 95% of my diet was grocery store 80-20 ground beef. I would buy it in bulk packs, 3+ pounds, and I would cook that all up the night before. I'd put it in a giant Tupperware, and I'd bring it into work, and I'd pour all the fat into the Tupperware and eat the liquid fat. It tasted great to me cold. It's like ice cream with all the tallow, but you're really not supposed to eat that much rendered fat. And a lot of people find they get really bad GI distress if they eat a lot of rendered fat, either, you know, diarrhea or extreme constipation, but either way, their stomachs do not feel good. And so I was doing that. I was also fasting most of the day and eating huge meals at night, which I've since found really hurts my sleep quality. You know, and I was drinking coffee through the morning part of the day and then shifting over to huge meals later in the day, which on top of a stressful job, I think just hiked my cortisol response. I wasn't eating organs. I could not stand the taste of liver. I couldn't stand the smell of liver. I was eating steaks when I could afford them, and they were on sale, but I was eating, you know, 3 to 4 pounds of meat a day. So I couldn't eat ribeyes all day long. And that's kind of how I started. I was eating some eggs, but mostly focused on grocery store ground beef. That's how I started out.
Well, that sounds pretty common actually.
Yeah.
And I'm with you on the rendered fat stuff. Oh my goodness, no. And organ meat, no. I have tried and no, it's a no go. No. So I get you there. Okay, so after you figured out the whole meat-based thing and you started evolving in the way you eat and etc., what has changed for you? What
Yeah.
benefits have you noticed? And have you noticed anything that wasn't particularly great?
Absolutely. So starting out, like I said, I had a lot of that GI distress because I was doing the diet wrong. And I've been doing, you know, a meat-based diet I won't say strict carnivore, because some people have very strict terms around how they'll use that term. For 4 years, I was very strict for the first 3 years, to be fair, and I got a lot smarter about eating, more meat, less rendered fat, sometimes incorporating suet or bone marrow, but really trying to eat the fat on the meat, not the fat that cooks off the meat, incorporating eggs. I grew a taste for liver. So folks who can't stand it now, believe me, it actually changes somehow. I got to the point where I could eat it if it was cooked in bacon fat, which anything cooked in bacon fat is delicious. And then I eventually got to the point where I loved the taste of it raw, which is how I eat it now. So most people will say that's impossible, but it actually happened to me. Trust me. And then I started incorporating a little bit more seafood, and really just shifted my meal timing earlier in the day, more frequent meals. And so that helped a lot. So when I first started the diet and I was doing everything wrong, my sleep quality was still poor because I was eating these giant meals late at night of really fatty meat and having the GI distress in the middle of the night. But I felt so much more energy throughout the day, and my workouts improved, and my body composition improved, and my mood improved. And all of a sudden I felt like I didn't need half as much caffeine to be awake during the day. And my joint stress improved, and my recovery from workouts was way better. And I had way better cognition than even on keto. I felt like my brain was on a higher level, and I could concentrate and think and recall things better than ever before. So that was amazing. And then as I actually troubleshooted and did a more, what I would call, proper version of a carnivore diet, my GI stress completely eradicated most of the time, except for when I tried certain experiments like really high fat. Even with suet, I find I can't do the really high fat version of carnivore, even with raw beef suet. And my workouts have continued to be better. My focus is better. My satiety between meals is much, much better. I'm not thinking about food all the time. My cravings completely eradicated. And now more recently, in my 4th year of a meat-based diet, a carnivore type diet, I've been able to slowly reintroduce some non-carnivore foods. And I started with low sugar vegetables, or low sugar fruits like zucchini, and things like that. And now I have more things like strawberries and blueberries occasionally, sometimes some honey, sometimes some white rice, sweet potatoes, yogurt. And I find I tolerate those things really well, much better than I did before. I'm still able to get all the benefits of the carnivore diet with having a little bit more variety. And some people say that's not carnivore. And I will say to them, a carnivore in biology is any animal that eats meat, first of all. Second of all, there's a thing called hypercarnivore. There's hypercarnivore, mesocarnivore, and hypocarnivore. Hypercarnivore is if more than, I think, 70% of your diet comes from animal products, which I fall into that category. Mesocarnivore is like 40 to 70%, etc. So I really think the carnivore diet is not black or white. And if you're eating mostly animal foods, that's fantastic. If you have an autoimmune disorder or some reason or some psychological reason, some relationship with food that mandates that you need to have a really strict animal food only diet, that's fantastic. Do that for you, but please don't tell everyone that that's what they have to do. And if other people can tolerate other foods and it increases their adherence or their enjoyment or their performance or anything, then that's fantastic too. But I will always be a huge fan of the strict version of the carnivore diet and a more flexible version. And that's what's worked really well for me.
Well said. Love it, love it, love it. That
Thank
was
you.
perfect. Yay, love it. Okay, I just want to ask you one more question.
Yeah, absolutely.
Out of everything about the carnivore diet, what would you say is the number one thing that just
Mm,
you love about it?
mm. That's a really good question. I love seeing how many people have benefited from it, and how well so many people have done with this diet, and how many people's lives have been transformed and their families' lives. There's so many people who get their dad back, get their uncle back, who didn't have that before, get their mom back because that person was so sick, either with obesity or metabolic disease or depression or any one of the chronic diseases and autoimmune conditions I've heard of, and we've all heard of people healing through this type of dietary approach and elimination style diet. I think that's fantastic. And that's what I really love about the carnivore diet. And then personally, I'll just say I love eating a giant ribeye steak and feeling so satisfied in that meat bliss and, being not feeling attached to food all the time, really feeling like you can separate yourself from food between meals. I think that's really valuable.
I love that. That is perfect ending.
Thank
Thank
you.
you so much for joining us, Scott, and I love hearing your story. And thank you for joining.
Thank you, Amber. Thank you so much for having me.
Bye.
Bye.